On my 18th birthday, my parents sat me down and said, "We're not your real family, you were adopted." Then they handed me a bag and said I had to move out. I just smiled, because they didn't know what I had found weeks before. Logan had always felt like something didn't quite fit. Growing up in the quiet suburbs of Wilmington, North Carolina, his life had the kind of predictable routine that most people would call safe. But for Logan, that safety always carried the scent of something artificial, like furniture polish masking something rotten underneath. On the morning of his 18th birthday, the air felt unusually still, heavy in a way he couldn't explain. The sun filtered through the blinds in narrow slits, casting prison bar shadows across his bedroom floor. His parents, Mark and Susan, were already downstairs when he came into the kitchen. Susan was buttering toast with robotic precision. Mark sat reading the paper like always, his fingers smudged with ink. There were no balloons, no wrapped presents, not even a happy birthday banner. Just the clink of a spoon in a coffee cup and the low hum of the refrigerator. Logan sat across from them and ate his eggs in silence. "Big day," Mark muttered without looking up. Susan nodded, her lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. Logan gave a half smile. "Yeah, big day." The rest of the day passed in silence, marked only by the occasional awkward glance or cough. He stayed in his room, pretending to nap, but his eyes remained open the whole time, tracing the cracks in the ceiling. As evening fell, the silence grew louder. At precisely 7 o'clock in the evening, Susan called out from downstairs, "Logan, can you come into the living room?" He knew it was coming. The moment, the truth, the shift. He walked down the steps slowly, each creak of the wood a countdown. When he entered the room, both of them were sitting stiffly on the couch, facing an armchair set up like an interrogation seat. A single paper bag sat on the floor beside them. Logan sat down without being asked. Mark cleared his throat. Susan took a deep breath. "You're 18 now," Mark said, folding his hands in front of him. "You're legally an adult." "That means some things need to be said," Susan added, her voice brittle. Logan leaned forward slightly, giving them the attention they'd never seemed to want before. Mark's voice was flat. "We're not your real parents, you were adopted." Susan quickly jumped in. "And now that you're 18, we think it's time for you to go your own way." She nodded toward the bag on the floor. "There's some money, some clothes. We're done here." Logan looked at the bag, then back at them. His face was unreadable for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not a sarcastic smirk, not a mocking grin. A calm, measured smile, like someone who had been waiting for the punchline of a joke he'd already heard. "I figured," he said quietly. Susan blinked. "What?" "I figured this would happen," Logan said, still smiling. "And it's fine, really," Mark frowned. "You're not surprised?" "No," Logan said. "I'm not." He stood up slowly, walked over to the bag, and picked it up. It was lighter than he expected, like they didn't expect him to stay gone very long, or like they didn't care what happened to him after he left. "Is that all?" he asked, turning back to them. Susan looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't. Mark just nodded once. Logan nodded too. Then, without another word, he walked toward the door. He didn't look back as he stepped into the warm North Carolina night. The cicadas hummed, the air smelled faintly of pine and gasoline, and the stars blinked like they were trying to send him a message. He had known for weeks now, not about the adoption, that part he'd suspected for years, but about something deeper, something hidden. He had found something in the shadows of their house, locked away and forgotten. And now that the truth was finally spoken, it didn't break him. It freed him, because Logan Croswell had already started uncovering who he really was. And the answers weren't in that house, with those people, or in that bag they handed him. The answers were in the past, and he was ready to chase them. The basement was always a forbidden place in the house. Logan remembered the first time he tried to go down there alone. He must have been 7 or 8. The light switch at the top of the stairs hadn't worked, and when he asked Mark about it, he got a sharp, "Don't go down there, ever," followed by a locked door the next morning. Over the years, the basement became a mystery wrapped in avoidance, something that lingered at the edges of his curiosity but never demanded his full attention until 3 weeks before his birthday. That night had started like any other. A restless kind of insomnia had settled over him, his mind buzzing with fragments he couldn't place. Questions that didn't have answers. Logan had always felt like an intruder in his own life. Mark and Susan weren't cruel, but their affection was always hollow, practiced. Birthdays were celebrated with store-bought cakes and stiff smiles. Christmases brought gifts but not warmth. There were no baby photos of him in the house, no stories about when he first walked or spoke or scraped his knees. The few memories he did have from early childhood were foggy, uncertain, like watching a movie where the first 10 minutes had been erased. That particular night, the hallway was silent and dim. Everyone had gone to sleep. Logan stepped out of his room barefoot and moved slowly toward the basement door. He had found the key weeks ago, tucked inside an old book in Mark's office, labeled only with a tiny tag that read, "Utility." He held it in his hand now, his thumb tracing the worn ridges of the metal. He hesitated only for a moment before sliding the key into the lock. The click was louder than he expected. He opened the door, and the smell hit him first. Damp wood, dust, and something older, something sour and long undisturbed. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended slowly. He flicked the light switch at the bottom of the steps. This one worked, but the single bulb overhead gave off a dim, flickering glow. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old paint cans, gardening tools, boxes of faded holiday decorations. And in the far corner, half covered by a dusty drop cloth, was a locked metal chest. It didn't look like it belonged to Mark or Susan. The design was too ornate, almost antique. The lock was rusted, but intact. Logan kneeled down and pulled the cloth aside, revealing initials carved faintly into the top, EC. His heart began to race. He tried the key from Mark's office again, and to his surprise, it fit. The lid opened with a long groan. Inside were stacks of papers, yellowed with age. At first glance, they looked like official documents, birth records, hospital forms, envelopes sealed and unsealed. Logan dug carefully through them. There was a birth certificate. His eyes locked onto it instantly. The name on it was not Logan Matthews. It read Lucas Crosswell. His place of birth was listed as Asheville, North Carolina. His mother's name, Elizabeth Crosswell. No father's name was listed. He sat back, stunned. For a moment, the basement seemed to close in on him. The wooden beams, the damp air, the flickering light, it all became distant, secondary to the paper trembling in his hands. He had a different name, a different mother, a different life that had been kept from him for 18 years. Beneath the documents there were letters, dozens of them. Most were written in a hurried, slanted hand, addressed to no one in particular. Some were drafts, unsent, unfinished. Others were complete and signed Elizabeth. They spoke of fear, of secrecy, of someone watching her. She mentioned a company, Tarkon Dynamics, and hinted at a discovery she had made, something dangerous. There were instructions, warnings. One line repeated itself in several letters, sometimes underlined, sometimes circled in red ink. Protect. So the child, never let them find him. Logan kept digging. Near the bottom of the chest, wrapped in cloth, was a photograph. It was old and slightly torn at the edges, but the image was clear. A woman in her late 20s, holding a newborn, in her arms. Her expression was tense but defiant, as if she knew the picture might be the only trace of their existence left behind. Logan stared at the photo for a long time. The baby's face was partly turned, but he recognized the curve of the cheek, the dark eyes, the shape of the mouth. It was him. He knew it. He flipped the photo over. On the back, written in faint pencil, were the words, "Never let them find him first." He sat on the cold basement floor for what felt like hours, surrounded by pieces of a life he never knew existed. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. Instead, something quiet and powerful stirred inside him, clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when the ground beneath you stops pretending to be solid. For the first time, The feeling of being out of place made sense. The polite detachment from Mark and Susan, the absence of origin in his own memories, the unexplained distance in his childhood, it was all part of a larger truth. He climbed back up the stairs slowly, locking the chest again and returning the key to its hiding place. Over the next several days, he studied every letter, every document. He memorized dates, names, locations. He mapped connections in a journal. He hid beneath the floorboard of his room. And though he said nothing to Mark and Susan, he watched them differently now. Not as parents, not even as guardians, but as people who had kept him from something vital, something real. So when they told him on his 18th birthday that he had been adopted and needed to leave, Logan didn't feel anger or betrayal. He felt confirmation. The mask had finally dropped, and underneath it was the truth he had already begun to uncover. He didn't need their explanation. He didn't need their pity. He had already started to walk away from them long before they handed him that paper bag. And the name Elizabeth Crosswell had already taken root in his mind like a spark waiting to catch flame. Because somewhere someone had gone to great lengths to keep him hidden. And now that the truth was in his hands, he was ready to find out why. Logan didn't wait until morning. The streets were dark, glazed with the mist of late-night humidity, and the streetlights buzzed like old neon signs. He walked with purpose. The photograph and documents from the box folded carefully into the inside pocket of his jacket. His backpack, stuffed hastily with the essentials, bounced softly against his back with each step. He didn't need to say goodbye. There was no one left to say it to. The public library in Wilmington opened early, and by the time the first rays of dawn stretched over the horizon, Logan was sitting at a terminal, staring at the search bar on the screen. The name burned in his mind like it had been carved. There, Elizabeth Crosswell. He typed it in slowly, as if the act itself carried weight. The search brought up hundreds of results: academic publications, environmental articles, old news clippings. But one headline caught his eye immediately. Renowned environmental scientist missing after controversial discovery. He clicked. The article was from nearly 17 years ago. The photo at the top of the page stopped his breath. It was her, the same woman from the photograph in the box. Hair swept back, eyes intense, a quiet strength radiating from her face. The article described Elizabeth as a rising star in environmental science, particularly in the study of soil contamination and chemical pollutants. She had been working with a now defunct branch of the Environmental Protection Agency when she reportedly went missing. According to the piece, she had uncovered something she believed to be dangerous, though no specifics were provided, and had been preparing to go public when she vanished without a trace. There were no follow-up stories, no official conclusions, just an echo in time where a promising career had been swallowed whole. Logan leaned back in his chair, the hum of the computer filling the silence in his mind. She wasn't just a name. She was real, a real woman with a real story. And now that story was connected to him by more than blood. It was connected by a vanishing. He opened another browser window and began searching for anything tied to the name Crosswell. There were few genealogy sites, mostly dead ends, but then he found a university page archived from over a decade ago. Elizabeth Crosswell had been a guest lecturer at Duke University, giving a talk titled Environmental Policy and the Ethics of Exposure. A dry title, but it suggested something deeper. Logan clicked through the archive, downloading every PDF, every linked article, every shred of data he could find. The most unexpected clue came from a community blog, buried deep in a local historian's website. It was a scanned image of a newsletter from a small town in central North Carolina, Boone Creek. The newsletter was old, scanned poorly, but readable. One section caught his eye. Dr. Elizabeth Crosswell, formerly of Asheville, has moved into our community to continue her research in private. We welcome her and wish her peace and progress in her new home. The date was 18 years ago, sir. Logan searched for property records in Boone Creek. He found an address listed under the name E. Crosswell on a county database. The home had been purchased 18 years earlier and foreclosed shortly after her disappearance. It had remained unoccupied ever since. He wrote the address down in his notebook, 412 Larkspur Lane, his bus left at noon. By the time he arrived in Boone Creek, the sun was high and the air thick with the scent of pine and diesel. It was a small town, tucked between patches of forest and long, winding roads. People walked slowly here, like the weight of time pressed down heavier. The bus station was little more than a bench under a rusted tin roof. Logan adjusted his backpack, checked the address again, and started walking. The house at 412 Larkspur Lane stood at the edge of a wooded lot, surrounded by overgrowth and silence. It was a two-story structure, weathered and forgotten. Yellow police tape still fluttered faintly from one of the front porch beams. The windows were boarded. The front door was marked with a government notice, "Property seized pending investigation." Logan stood at the edge of the property for several minutes, studying every detail. The mailbox still bore the name Crosswell in faded black letters. He circled to the side of the house, looking for another way in. The back door was damaged, hanging slightly off its hinges. He pulled it open slowly, careful not to draw attention. The interior was covered in dust, cobwebs clinging to the corners like the house was trying to preserve its last memories. Inside, the rooms were half empty. Furniture covered in sheets, shelves filled with water-damaged books. In what must have been an office, he found old papers scattered across a desk, many of them illegible. One wall bore a map with pins marking various towns and facilities. Most had been pulled down, but one remained, a red pin in the city of Guy, Raleigh. On the floor beside the desk, Logan found a torn notebook. The pages were scribbled with chemical formulas, timelines, and fragmented thoughts. In one corner, a single name had been written again and again: Tarkon. Tarkon. Tarkon Dynamics. He took a photo of the page with his phone, then paused when he saw something half hidden beneath the rug, a trapdoor. He pulled the rug aside and opened it. A narrow staircase led down to a small concrete basement. The air grew colder as he descended, the smell of mildew and forgotten years curling around him. At the bottom was a single dusty shelf. On it, a sealed envelope with his name on it. Not Logan. Lucas. He didn't open it yet. He stared at the handwriting, recognizing it from the letters in the basement back home. Elizabeth's hand. Somehow she had prepared this. Somehow she had known he might find this place. Before he could tear open the envelope, he heard a creak upstairs, a soft, deliberate step. Someone else was in the house. He stuffed the envelope into his jacket and climbed the stairs silently, pressing himself against the wall near the door. Another creak, closer this time. He risked a glance around the corner and saw an elderly man standing in the living room, gazing at the fireplace. He looked worn by time, his posture hunched, but his eyes were alert. "I knew you'd come eventually," the man said without turning around. Logan's breath caught. The man slowly turned toward him. "You're the boy from the photograph, aren't you?" Logan froze in the silence that followed the old man's question. For a second, it felt like the walls of the abandoned house were holding their breath, listening. Dust floated through the thin rays of sunlight cutting in, from the broken blinds. The man stood still, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his gaze, recognition, maybe even sorrow. Logan didn't answer right away. He stepped out from the shadows, keeping his distance, eyes sharp with suspicion. "Who are you?" The man turned fully toward him, hands visible and calm. "My name's Marvin. Marvin Clay. I lived 2 houses down, used to cut Elizabeth's lawn when her back started giving her trouble. She was a good woman, kind, determined, and very, very afraid." Logan didn't relax. He studied the man, trying to detect any sign of deception. "How? Do you know who I am?" "I don't, not for sure. But the second I saw you standing there with that look in your eyes, I remembered her. She used to say if anything ever happened to her, there might come a day when a boy would show up here looking for answers. She said he'd probably be about your age." "She told you that?" Marvin nodded, stepping slowly toward one of the old chairs, brushing the dust off with a cloth from his coat pocket. "She didn't say much, not directly. Elizabeth was careful. She didn't trust many people, but she trusted me enough to ask me to watch the house after she disappeared, in case someone came looking, in case you came looking." "Logan, still hadn't moved from where he stood. The envelope inside his jacket suddenly felt heavier. "She's my mother." Marvin looked at him and nodded slowly, solemnly. "I know." There was no surprise in his voice. No doubt. It was like he had been waiting for this moment for years. "She left something for me," Logan said, voice steady. "Downstairs." Marvin gave a faint smile, more of a grim acknowledgement than joy. "Then she must have known you'd find her trail. She was smarter than all of us, smarter than the people who came after her, smarter than the ones who tried to erase her." Logan finally sat, the tension in his shoulders slowly unwinding. "What happened to her?" Marvin's face darkened. "That's a long story, and most of it's been buried so deep it's hard to pull up, but I'll tell you what I know." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Elizabeth wasn't just a scientist, she was a whistleblower. She found something, some chemical data tied to illegal dumping. The company involved, Tarkon Dynamics, had government contracts, military-level stuff. When she tried to bring it to the surface, everything changed. Phones tapped, strangers following her car. Mail going missing. She stopped trusting the police, said there were too many hands in the pot. Logan absorbed each word, the puzzle pieces clicking faster now, sharper. "She told me she was going to disappear," Marvin continued. "Said she didn't have a choice. Said it was the only way to keep you safe. I never knew where she went, just that she was running out of time. And one day, she was gone." Logan's fingers brushed the edge of the envelope in his coat again, his pulse quickening. "Why didn't anyone look for her?" "Oh, they did," Marvin said, eyes narrowing, "but not the right people. The ones who came after she vanished weren't looking to help. They came in suits, no badges, no questions, just boxes taken from the house and silence left behind." Logan's throat tightened. "And me? What happened to me?" Marvin shook his head. "No one ever found you, not here anyway. Word was she made arrangements, something underground. She told me she had one chance to get you out. She didn't say how or with who, but she was convinced someone would take you, raise you quietly, far away from all this." Mark and Susan. The memory of their cold eyes, their forced distance, slammed into his chest. He understood now. They hadn't saved him, they had hidden him for someone else, for a price. "She trusted someone," Logan said quietly, "and that someone sold her out." Marvin didn't deny it. "Maybe, or maybe they just followed orders. Either way, you've come full circle now, and if you found this house, then you're..." Standing at the door she left open. "You just need to walk through it." Logan took out the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten card. The photo showed Elizabeth standing near a large, rusted fence, with her government warning sign half buried in the grass. A facility of some kind loomed behind her, concrete, grim, surrounded by chain link and barbed wire. The card bore only 5 words: "Never trust what they say." And underneath, a name written in looping cursive, Maya. "Maya," Logan read aloud. "Do you know who that is?" Marvin shook his head. "No, but if Elizabeth left you that name, then she meant for you to find her. I'd bet everything I have on it." Logan stared at the photograph, trying to identify landmarks, signage, anything that could place it. Nothing was immediately familiar, but something about the facility's architecture triggered a faint memory, something he'd seen on the news years ago. A chemical plant, maybe. A waste processing center. He would have to dig further. He looked up. "Can I stay here for a few days? I need to search through what's left." Marvin stood and placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. "You don't need to ask. You've got more right to this place than anyone." For the next 2 days, Logan scoured the house. He took photos of every map, document, and scrap of writing he found. He uploaded what he could to a secure drive he had created and began to construct a timeline, a web of connections. He printed out every photo and pinned them to the walls like a private investigator chasing ghosts. And each time he looked at Elizabeth's face, he felt something stronger than grief. He felt resolve. When he finally left the house, it was with a plan and a destination. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a path now. He boarded a bus heading east, with Elizabeth's name in his heart and Maya's name in his pocket. And as the miles blurred past his window, Logan no longer felt like a boy abandoned. He felt like a storm coming for those who had tried to erase him. The road to Raleigh was long, winding through stretches of pine forests and empty farmland that seemed to stretch into forever. Logan kept his eyes on the window, but his mind wasn't in the bus. It was in the notebook on his lap, pages covered in names, places, and symbols drawn from Elizabeth's notes. Each scribble felt like a breadcrumb, each arrow a thread in a map woven by desperation and secrecy. And in the center of everything, the name Tarkon Dynamics stood like a fortress of shadow. They weren't just the reason she had disappeared. They were the reason he had lived a life not his own. He arrived in Raleigh just after 6 o'clock in the evening, the sky darkening fast with early spring clouds. The city buzzed with movement and artificial light, the hum of traffic and human friction surrounding him like static. He had only one lead, an old contact name mentioned in one of Elizabeth's letters, written hurriedly in the margin, Marvin Clay. But now, Marvin had already played his part. The next name she had given him was even more cryptic, Maya. No last name, no address, just a first name scrawled next to a line that read, "If you find her, you find the truth." Logan didn't know how to search for a woman with no surname, no confirmed location and no photo, but he had a direction, and sometimes that was enough. He started with public libraries again, hunting through environmental activism forums and whistleblower blogs archived from the early 2000s. His search for Maya Tarkon whistleblower yielded very little until a broken forum post led him to a dark web archive. There, buried among conspiracy threads and anonymous exposés, was a grainy image of a woman testifying in a dimly lit room. The subtitle read, "Maya R., former Tarkon chemist, confidential hearing 2008. Her face was partially blurred, her voice redacted in the transcript, but Logan knew instinctively that she was the Maya his mother had written about. Her words in the testimony were redacted, but the metadata tagged her location as Triangle District. The Triangle District was an industrial zone just outside central Raleigh, lined with shuttered factories, data centers, and offices. That had long outlived their usefulness. It was the kind of place people forgot, the kind of place secrets went to sleep. Logan spent the next 2 days combing the area. He walked miles on foot, mapping abandoned buildings, knocking on doors, asking vague questions. Most people ignored him. Others told him to leave. But persistence has its own gravity, and eventually it pulls something toward you. On the third night, he followed a lead from a junkyard worker who mentioned seeing a woman matching Maya's description, buying scrap metal and circuit boards once a month. She wore a grey hoodie, always paid in cash, and drove an old sedan with tinted windows. The worker pointed toward a burned-out building near the edge of the zone and said, "If she's real, she came from there." Logan found the building the next morning. It was a squat, windowless structure, wrapped in layers of graffiti and neglect. A steel door stood half open, and behind it, the dark, swallowed light. Logan stepped inside cautiously, flashlight in hand, the floor creaking beneath his feet. It didn't take long before he felt he was being watched. From the shadows, a voice called out, "Turn around slowly, hands where I can see them." He obeyed, lifting his arms and facing the source of the voice. She stepped out of the dark like a whisper becoming a storm. Her hair was tied back, her posture tense, but her eyes were focused and intelligent. She held no weapon, just a device in her hand that looked like a scanner. "Maya?" Logan asked. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" I'm Elizabeth Crosswell's son." The silence that followed felt endless. Then Maya's grip on the scanner loosened. She lowered it slowly, stepping closer. "That's not possible." "It is," Logan said. "I have proof." She left messages, notes, a photo of you. She said to trust you. Maya studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see his mother in the shape of his face. Then she nodded once. "Come with me." She led him through a hidden door behind, a wall of rusted shelving. It opened into a staircase that descended into a concealed sublevel, clean, well-lit, a world completely different from the decay above. Logan followed, his pulse hammering in his ears. At the bottom, a room opened into what looked like a lab, crossed with a hideout. Monitors lined the walls, each displaying maps, code, and surveillance feeds. 2 others were seated at consoles, heads turning as Maya entered with Logan. "He's real," she said simply. The others exchanged a glance, then nodded. Maya turned to Logan. "We've been hiding from Tarkon for almost 2 decades. I worked there once. Elizabeth was my partner in the field. Not officially, but we shared data. We were both onto the same thing, a chemical called XR17. On the surface, it was just an agricultural stabilizer. But when combined with certain soil conditions, it became toxic. And Tarkon knew." She began to pace, her voice steady. "We tried to expose it. They blacklisted me, sent people after her. She knew they wouldn't stop until she disappeared, and when she did, we lost contact. We thought you were gone too." "I was hidden," Logan said. "They gave me to a couple, Mark and Susan. They weren't parents. They were paid to keep me off the radar." Maya's expression darkened. "Tarkon runs deep. Government. Contracts. Federal protection. They bury mistakes in orphanages and fake adoptions. You were a liability they needed to suppress before you even spoke your first word." Logan opened his notebook and showed her the photo of the facility, the map with the red pin. "Do you know what this place is?" Maya took the image and studied it closely. Then she looked up, her face grim. "Yes, that's Site 13, a black site owned by a Tarkon subsidiary. It's not on any official maps, but we've suspected for years that it was used to hold people they couldn't just kill. Scientists, whistleblowers, test subjects." "Could she still be there?" Logan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya didn't answer right away. Then she said, "If she is, then we need to move. Now." Logan stared at the screens, his mother's face echoing in his memory. The past wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a battlefield. The days that followed were unlike anything Logan had experienced. Living in Maya's underground hideout was a complete shift from the false normalcy he'd grown up with. There were no set routines, no quiet evenings, no soft boundaries between day and night. Time blurred into a constant rhythm of surveillance, encrypted messages, and whispered strategy. The air in the room always felt slightly electric, like a storm was looming just outside the walls, and the only thing keeping it at bay was the sheer determination of the people inside. Maya introduced Logan to the rest of her team. Lena, a former cybersecurity analyst who had defected after exposing illegal surveillance contracts tied to Tarkon, and Jude, a logistics expert who had once managed shipments for one of Tarkon's ghost facilities before he turned whistleblower. Each of them carried the weight of a past betrayal, but none as personal as Logan's. They spoke to him with a kind of deference, not because of his lineage, but because of the clarity with which he had arrived. He hadn't stumbled into the truth. He had dug it out step by step against every attempt to bury it. Maya's team didn't just believe in Elizabeth, they revered her. In their circles, she had become a symbol of resistance, of scientific integrity, of truth sacrificed in silence. The idea that she might still be alive electrified the group in a way Logan hadn't expected. He could see it in their eyes every time he spoke her name. Late one night, Maya pulled Logan aside to the far end of the room where the walls were lined with old filing cabinets and discarded monitors. She reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a small black envelope, sleek, heavy, sealed with red wax. "Elizabeth left this with me 18 years ago," she said. "She told me not to open it unless 2 things happened. 1, that she disappeared without trace, and 2, that her son came looking." Logan stared at it, pulse quickening. "Why didn't you give it to Marvin?" She didn't want Marvin involved past the house, said he was too visible, too likely to be watched. But she knew I'd vanish too if I had to, and I did. I disappeared the day after she did. Went off-grid, changed everything about myself. But I kept this." She handed it to him. Logan broke the seal and unfolded the thick parchment inside. The paper crackled under his fingers as he read, "Lucas, if you're reading this, then it means I failed to protect you the way I hoped. But if you found Maya, then you're closer to the truth than they ever wanted you to be. Enclosed is the key to a dead drop, my last failsafe. Everything I discovered, Everything they tried to erase, it's all there. The access code is personal, only you can unlock it. The passphrase is your birth weight, your time of birth, and the lullaby I used to hum to you, even when they were listening. I trust you to remember, because I trusted you to survive. There was no signature, just a faint watermark of Elizabeth's initials burned into the bottom corner. Logan reread it over and over, trying to decipher the message. Birth weight, time of birth, the lullaby. He didn't know any of it. His childhood had been devoid of stories, photos, or keepsakes, but then he remembered. The box in the basement. The medical records. One of the forms had included a hospital discharge summary. He ran to his backpack and retrieved the photocopies he had made. There it was. Weight at birth, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. Time, 4:23 in the morning. He had no idea about the lullaby. That felt impossible. But Maya had another idea. She retrieved an old cassette tape recorder from a cabinet, labeled only Echo. She inserted a cassette and hit play. A static hiss filled the room, followed by a faint recording of Elizabeth's voice reading a scientific memo. Logan listened closely, straining for anything familiar. Halfway through the tape, she paused. There was silence. Then, softly, a melody began, hummed gently, almost instinctively. It was the kind of sound a mother would make while cradling her child, thinking no one else could hear. Logan's eyes stung. His breath caught. He knew that tune, not from memory, not consciously, but somewhere deep inside, that melody had lived, dormant but present. He nodded. That's it, he whispered. They combined the elements, the weight, the time, and the melody. Using Lena's help, they located the coordinates embedded in a file found on Elizabeth's old research disk that Maya had kept. The numbers pointed to a storage unit facility on the outskirts of Durham, registered under a fake name, but leased just 2 months before Elizabeth vanished. That night, they drove out in pairs. Jude went ahead to scout the location, while Lena stayed behind to monitor communications. Logan and Maya arrived under cover of darkness. The facility was surrounded by chain-link fence and motion sensor lights, but Maya had the security codes from an old Tarkon blueprint. Inside the unit was a single dust-covered safe bolted to the concrete floor. Maya handed Logan a small keypad connected to a makeshift decryption device. He entered the code, the combined data string based on his mother's note, and held his breath. The device beeped once. Then the safe clicked open. Inside was a hard drive, labeled simply XR17 dossier. Alongside it, a handwritten folder marked with Elizabeth's name. Logan opened the folder and scanned its contents. Charts, photographs of soil samples from various states, maps indicating water contamination routes, and most damning of all, memos between Tarkon executives and government officials confirming their knowledge of XR17's instability. Some of the documents were signed by someone with the initials C.L. Maya took one look at those letters and froze. Conrad Lewis, she said. He was her handler, oversaw her project, then disappeared. Rumor was, he climbed the ladder and took over Tarkon's private intelligence division. Logan clenched his fists. He knew, Logan said, voice low. He knew she had a child. He knew who I was. They took everything, every paper, every byte. They encrypted copies, spread them across cloud servers, and prepared them for release. But Maya knew what came next wouldn't be quiet. Now that they had opened the last vault, they would be hunted. They won't try to silence this quietly anymore, she told him. We're past that stage. Logan nodded. Let them come. I'm not hiding anymore. Because now, he didn't just carry his mother's name. He carried her war. The safe house began to feel smaller as the weight of what they had uncovered pressed down on every wall. Every breath inside that place was measured, calculated, like they were living on borrowed time. With the XR17 dossier in hand, the stakes had shifted. What had once been whispers between activists and digital trails buried in the deep web had now become a ticking bomb, and Logan could see it in Maya's eyes. She knew the fuse had been lit the moment they opened that safe. The next morning, Maya made a quiet call using an encrypted satellite device Logan hadn't noticed before. No names were spoken, no locations shared. She spoke in coded language that only someone trained to think in secrets could understand. When she hung up, she turned to Logan with a look of finality. "It's time you met the rest of us," she said. Logan followed her into a van disguised as a utility vehicle. They drove for over an hour, weaving through side roads and service, routes that felt deliberately chosen. At one point, they parked in a remote field and walked through dense woods until they reached a rusted chain-link fence, half consumed by vines. Beyond it stood an old freight elevator, hidden in a crumbling concrete shed. Maya pressed a series of keys into a keypad hidden behind a loose panel. The elevator door groaned open. They descended in silence. When the doors opened again, Logan stepped into a space that defied all his expectations. It was a facility beneath the ground, a kind of urban skeleton repurposed for survival and strategy. Old subway tunnels had been converted into corridors, leading to rooms filled with hardware, solar battery stations, servers humming with life. People moved in purposeful silence, men and women of varying ages and ethnicities, each with a look that said they had given something up to be here. "This is the network," Maya said as they walked. "The part of the world Tarkon never wanted to exist. We're not just hiding anymore. We're watching, recording, waiting." They entered a central hub, where a wide digital map projected images of the United States. Points of red marked confirmed Tarkon sites. Green points indicated whistleblowers, contacts, allies. The map pulsed, alive with data. Lena and Jude were already there, along with two others Logan hadn't met. One was a woman in her 40s with a hawk-like stare and a faint limp. The other was a young man, barely older than Logan, with sharp features and a voice that carried authority even in a whisper. "This is Ren and Devon," Maya said. "Ren handles operations, Devon runs intelligence. Between them, they know more about Tarkon than the company knows about itself." Devon offered Logan a nod of recognition. "We've heard a lot about you. Your mother was the reason most of us are still breathing." Ren didn't smile. She studied Logan with clinical detachment. "The last time someone with her blood walked in here, everything changed." Maya stepped forward. "We're about to change things again." She handed the hard drive to Ren, who immediately took it to a secure lab built into the far wall. Devon joined her, and within minutes, the data from the XR-17 dossier was being uploaded, analyzed, and cross-referenced with existing files. "The evidence is strong," Devon said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "This isn't just contamination, it's organized suppression, site documentation, financial bribes, internal emails with redacted government recipients. And this is the keystone, this document here." He highlighted a memo signed by Conrad Lewis, detailing a planned relocation of Elizabeth Crosswell, following her refusal to redact findings in a 2007 publication draft. It confirmed what Logan had feared. She had been silenced by force. Her disappearance was not an accident, it was an operation. Maya paced slowly. "Now we know who gave the order." Logan stood in the center of the room, the faces of the network around him, all waiting for the next step. He felt something inside him rising, a momentum that had been growing since the moment his so-called parents handed him a bag and told him to leave. He looked up at the map again and then turned toward Maya. "What's the plan?" he asked. Ren spoke next. "We release the files, simultaneously. Every channel we've got. Independent media, dark web, academic platforms, even corporate leaks. But it won't be enough. People won't act until they see a face, a name," Devon added. "Which is why we need to expose Conrad Lewis publicly. And we can. He's set to speak at a Tarkon conference in DC in 10 days. Logan frowned. "He's going to be in the open?" "Only for an hour," Maya said. "It's their annual internal summit. They think it's safe because it's invitation only. No media, no press." "But we have someone inside," Ren said. "A technician. They've already confirmed they can override the conference feed." Maya faced Logan. "If we can get you inside and you speak live, with the data, with the story, there's no going back. You'd be putting your face, your voice, your name on everything." Logan didn't hesitate. Then that's exactly what we'll do. The team moved quickly. Plans were drawn. Routes and disguises were arranged. The building where the conference would take place was mapped out down to the air vents and maintenance tunnels. The technician inside, codenamed Thorn, would trigger the feed at the right moment, giving Logan exactly 4 minutes on the air before the signal could be cut. As the final preparations took shape, Maya pulled Logan aside again. "There's one more thing," she said. "A message came in this morning. It was encrypted, buried in an old contact chain we thought was dead, but it had her code signature." Logan's breath caught. Maya continued. "It was only 2 lines. No location, no metadata, just this. They keep me underground. Time. Air's running out." Logan stared at her. "It's her." Maya nodded. "It's Elizabeth. She's alive." The room around him seemed to blur. For a second, the noise faded. The lights dimmed, and all he could hear was the rhythm of his own heartbeat. "We don't know where she is," Maya said, "but we think it might be Site 13. If we can confirm it, we go after her. No matter what." Logan looked her in the eyes. "We expose them first, then we get her." He wasn't a ghost anymore. He wasn't a secret or a mistake. He was the answer to everything they had tried to erase. The final days before the operation moved like a current, pulling Logan deeper into waters he could no longer see the bottom of. The network expanded its reach, activating old contacts, refreshing secure lines, and verifying every route that would lead them to Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, Maya and Ren worked day and night, calibrating every second of the broadcast plan, as if knowing that one fraction of a delay could cost them everything. There was a palpable tension in the air, not fear but precision, like a bowstring drawn tight. Then everything fell apart. It began with silence. Lena stopped responding to check-ins during her scheduled surveillance shift. At first, it seemed like a simple miscommunication. Maya dispatched Jude to find her, thinking perhaps she had moved to a backup post. But when he reached the designated location, the safe house had already been burned to the ground. No signs of Lena. No bodies. Just a scorched ruin and the faint smell of accelerant still clinging to the earth. An hour later, the underground server that housed the backup of the XR-17 dossier went dark. A forced shutdown, executed with a level of access that should have been impossible. Inside the network's base, a storm of movement broke out. Red. Lights flared. Devon's voice echoed through the intercoms as he issued protocols that hadn't been activated in over a decade. Ren barked orders to start the physical backups, while Maya stood in still silence, her eyes fixed on a single flashing point on the digital map. A tracer signal that had been injected into their core systems. They had been infiltrated. Somewhere in the network, someone had betrayed them. Logan stood frozen, watching it all unfold. The reality sank in slowly, like ink spilling into water. He turned to Maya. "What do we do now?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes shifted from the map to the small encrypted device in her hand, the one she always carried but never explained. With a flick of her fingers, she opened a private line and whispered a set of numbers. Then she turned back to Logan. We run now." Jude returned just before the evacuation began. His face was pale and he held something in his hand, a document folder scorched at the edges. It had been left deliberately near Lena's burned safe house. Inside was a single sheet, a copy of Logan's birth certificate and an official-looking Tarkon memo with one chilling line underlined in red. Asset compromised. Contingency 7A authorized. They weren't just hunting the network now. They were targeting Logan directly, and they were doing it with federal clearance. The team split into pairs and scattered. Maya took Logan, and they abandoned the elevator for a concealed tunnel that led beneath an old storm drain on the city outskirts. As they moved, Logan felt the shadows growing behind them. Not metaphorical ones, real ones. Men in dark coats and silent footsteps, vehicles without plates, the kind of pursuit that left no witnesses. They reached an abandoned train yard before nightfall and took cover inside a rusted control building. Maya patched into a temporary network using a portable uplink, while Logan kept watch from a cracked window. He could see the way she moved, now calculated, sharp, driven by something deeper than fear. "What's Contingency 7A?" he asked. Maya didn't look up. "It's a full erasure order, authorized when an asset is considered a liability beyond recovery. You're the asset, Logan, and they've decided you're not worth the risk of keeping alive." Logan nodded slowly, the information settling into his chest like iron. Tevin managed to reach them through a ghost channel just before midnight. His message was brief. The main hideout had been hit. Half the servers were wiped, but Wren had escaped with the master key drive. She was heading north, toward the fallback site in New Jersey. If Logan and Maya could survive the next 48 hours, they would meet there to complete the upload and activate the timed global release. But surviving those 48 hours was proving harder with each step. The next day brought more close calls, drones spotted overhead, unmarked cars idling too long at intersections, hotel rooms ransacked hours before they arrived. Maya never stopped moving, never stopped adapting, but Logan could see the weight pressing down on her. They weren't running from a company anymore. They were running from a system that had decided their existence was inconvenient. That night, they found shelter in an old mill-turned storage depot, long abandoned, its brick walls still bearing traces of soot from a fire decades earlier. Logan sat on the floor near the center of the building, arms wrapped around his knees, the hard drive containing the XR-17 evidence beside him. Maya stood nearby, inspecting their weapons and supplies. He finally spoke. "How did you do this for so long?" She glanced at him. "This, the running, the hiding, knowing that they're always a step behind you until suddenly they're not. How did you survive it?" Maya crouched beside him. "I didn't survive it, not all of me. I lost family, friends, years. But the part of me that did survive, the part that kept going, that was the part Elizabeth gave me. She believed in something more important than safety." Logan looked down at the hard drive. "She believed I could finish what she started." Maya's voice dropped. "She believed you were worth saving. That means you're worth fighting for, and right now that's all that matters." But even as she spoke, the hum of an approaching vehicle echoed outside. They moved instantly. Maya grabbed the drive, Logan secured the bag, and they slipped into the shadows of the mill just as two black SUVs pulled up. Men spilled out in silence, moving with practiced efficiency, night vision goggles scanning the dark. One of them carried a portable jammer, designed to kill signal within a half-mile radius. Maya motioned toward a rear exit. They sprinted through the ruins of the mill and into the trees behind it. The underbrush tore at their clothes, branches clawing at their faces. Logan's lungs burned. Maya led them along an old maintenance path that ran parallel to the highway. Behind them, the sound of pursuit followed, measured, relentless. Then, just ahead, Maya stopped. A metal container stood partially buried in the ground. She pulled open the lid and revealed a motorcycle hidden beneath a tarp. "Emergency escape route," she said. "Climb on." They rode through the night, wind biting at their skin, the roar of the engine a temporary shield against the silence of being hunted. Logan held on tight, the hard drive pressed between them as they crossed out of North Carolina and into Virginia. They didn't stop until the first light of dawn touched the edges of the highway. At a rest stop under the shade of pine trees, Maya pulled over. She checked the drive. It was intact. Logan looked out across the road. "They won't stop," he said. "No," she agreed, "but neither will we." And in that moment, exhausted and chased, he understood something that had never made sense until now. He wasn't just part of a story that had started 18 years ago. He was the turning point. By the time they crossed the border into New Jersey, the air had changed. Not just in temperature or scent, but in the way it moved, thicker, heavier, charged with the weight of the truth that now clung to Logan like a second skin. Each hour away from the wreckage of the network's infiltration felt like stolen time. Maya drove without pause, without music, without distraction, the engine's low rumble the only sound between them. They didn't speak much, but there was no need. Every second counted now. Every breath was a prelude to confrontation. They reached the fallback site by nightfall. It was a decommissioned train terminal turned underground archive center, owned by a shell company with links to a former network ally. Wren was already there, flanked by two silent techs who barely looked up from their stations. The air inside buzzed with static electricity and the faint hum of data transferring across miles of encrypted lines. Logan entered the main control room and immediately noticed the projection on the far wall. Photos, documents, internal Tarkon communications that were now verified and ready for broadcast. At the center of it all stood one image, a scanned page from a classified Tarkon, memorandum titled Project Guardian, Strategic Adoption Initiative. Logan stared at it for a long time before he moved closer. The memo outlined a covert program initiated nearly 2 decades earlier. Its goal was simple: relocate children of high-risk dissidents into state-monitored homes under the guise of adoption. The language was clinical, the tone detached, but the implications were monstrous. Children like him, children of whistleblowers, had been reassigned, not for safety, not for care, for control, to ensure silence, to erase futures before they had a chance to speak. One section of the memo bore 3 names. One of them stopped his breath. Mark D. Matthews, Handler ID 0451, Susan L. Matthews, Handler ID 0452. Subject assignment, Lucas Crosswell, clearance level 3. Logan stepped back, bile rising in his throat. Everything snapped into brutal clarity. Mark and Susan weren't just cold, they weren't just distant, they were part of the machine that tried to erase him. He hadn't been adopted, he had been planted, monitored, raised under a script, designed by people who never wanted him to know who he was. He remembered the way Mark used to stare at him during dinner, always just a few seconds too long. The way Susan would freeze whenever he asked about his baby pictures, or why no one in the family looked like him. At the time, it felt like detachment. Now he saw it for what it was: management, containment. They weren't avoiding love. They were avoiding risk. Maya watched him carefully as he processed the page. She didn't interrupt. Logan finally spoke, voice low. They lied to me every day. They watched me. They must have reported everything. Grades, behavior, what I read, who I talked to. Yes, Wren said from across the room. They did. Every interaction, every friend you made, every time you stepped outside protocol, they flagged it. Logan looked up. You've seen the reports. We decrypted part of them this morning, she said. They were submitted to a special operations team under Tarkon's Behavioral Risk Assessment Division. The reports end about a month ago. When I started digging, Logan said. When you found the box, Maya added. They must have known I was close, Logan said, fists clenched. Wren nodded. That's when they escalated the operation. The reassignment protocol ends once the subject reaches legal adulthood. You turned 18. That gave them the window to sever the guardianship, which is exactly what they did. They kicked me out, Logan muttered, because that was part of the plan. Distance themselves, erase the paper trail. Maya stepped forward, placing a data pad in his hands. There's more. The reassignment wasn't just about hiding you, it was about leverage. In the event Elizabeth resurfaced, they planned to use you as pressure. Logan shook his head, his voice filled with disgust. They raised me to be bait. Yes, Wren confirmed, but you're not bait anymore. You're the weapon. The words didn't settle like praise. They settled like responsibility. Logan looked back at the projected documents. One of them contained a photograph, him at age 10, sitting on the porch of the Matthews house, looking down at a book. Taken from a distance, a surveillance image. He had no memory of it being captured. There were dozens more, each dated and tagged with a behavioral score. He wanted to burn it all, every page, every image, but he didn't, he couldn't. This was evidence. This was the skeleton of the machine that had swallowed his life. And if he destroyed it, they'd keep doing it to someone else. Logan turned to Maya. How do we make it stick? Once this goes live, how do we stop them from spinning it, covering it up, burying it again? She answered without hesitation. We hit 3 channels simultaneously: public stream, classified dump, and congressional leak. The redundancy, here's the point. They can deny one, maybe two, but not all three. Devon stepped into the room with fresh intel. We also located Conrad Lewis. Logan turned sharply. Where? He's already in DC, prepping for the Tarkon summit. He arrives at the conference venue in 48 hours. That's our opening, our only opening. The plan was already set. Logan would pose as a guest tech, gain access to the AV room and use Thorne's override to hijack the main screen feed. Once live, he would expose the XR-17 project, the adoption initiative, and the names behind them. His name, his face, his voice. It would all go out in real time, tethered to irrefutable documents and live reactions. There would be no walking it back. Not for Tarkon, not for Conrad, not for the government branches complicit in it all. But before that, there was one more thing Logan needed to do. I have to see them, he said. Maya's eyes narrowed. Mark and Susan? Logan nodded. I need to know if they'll admit it, if they'll say it to my face. They won't, Wren said. People like that don't confess. They deflect, they stall. I still have to try, Logan replied. He returned to Wilmington alone under the cover of night, using a different vehicle and burner ID. The Matthews house looked the same. Quiet, clean, ordinary. He knocked once, then again. Mark opened the door, frozen in place when he saw who stood there. You, he said flatly. Susan appeared behind him, her face drained of color. Logan stepped forward, voice calm, but sharp as a blade. Did you ever think I wouldn't find out? Did you ever think I wouldn't come back? Mark didn't speak. Susan looked like she might faint. Logan took a paper from his coat pocket, a printout of the memo with their handler IDs. He held it up. I know everything, he said, and in 2 days so will the rest of the world. He didn't wait for them to respond. He turned and walked away, each step carrying 18 years of silence and buried truth. He had seen their faces. Now it was time for them to see his. The wind in Washington, D.C. that morning carried an uneasy chill, though the sky was clear. Beneath the calm surface of the Capitol's glass buildings and freshly trimmed hedges, Logan moved like a shadow, unseen by the crowds of workers and tourists filing through the avenues. The city breathed routine, but for Logan, every corner was a checkpoint, every glance a calculation. This was the day, the final stage of a plan born from decades of silence, built on data buried under government contracts and bloodless betrayals. Every lie they had buried was about to be unearthed, not with whispers, but with a voice too public to erase. The Tarkon summit was being held at the Hamilton Gray Conference Center, a monolithic structure just 5 blocks from Capitol Hill. From the outside, it was indistinguishable from any other building in the district. Flags waved. Security moved with calm efficiency. VIPs arrived in tinted cars, but inside, beyond the lobby and beneath layers of biometric security, Tarkon's inner circle was preparing to celebrate another year of unchecked dominance. And at the heart of that celebration stood Conrad Lewis. Conrad wasn't just a name on paper anymore. Logan had seen the videos, older now, heavier, but the same eyes from the surveillance photo that had haunted the reports on his mother's disappearance. He had risen through Tarkon with precision, playing the game of corporate warfare better than most generals played the real thing. He was the architect behind the Project Guardian protocols, the man who had signed off on Logan's erasure. And, according to Maya's intelligence, the man responsible for where Elizabeth was now, alive, imprisoned, possibly fading. The network's plan was ruthless in its efficiency. Thorne, the technician embedded within Tarkon's AV division, had already prepared the system override. Once activated, Logan's message would be streamed across every screen in the venue, from the main stage to every breakout room. Simultaneously, backup files would be dumped online through whistleblower portals, with timed releases to major independent journalists. A third copy would be sent directly to a sitting senator, known for his antagonism toward private military contractors, someone too visible for Tarkon to quietly threaten. Maya led the final briefing from a rooftop safe zone 2 blocks away. Her tone was as steady as ever, but Logan could see the fire behind her eyes. This wasn't just strategy for her, it was survival laced with vengeance. "You'll be inside for 22 minutes before Thorne triggers the feed," she said, pointing at the layout diagram spread across a metal table. "That's your window to get in. Reach the AV terminal and prepare the live message. Once the feed goes live, you'll have exactly 4 minutes before Tarkon's blackout protocols kick in. If you're not out by then, we can't pull you." Ren, patched in via audio from the fallback site, reinforced the final step. "Conrad will be on stage during your broadcast. You will be speaking directly in front of him. That's not just poetic, that's tactical. He won't have time to cut the feed. He won't know what's coming until it's too late." Logan nodded. He had reviewed the files too many times to forget a single line. Every date, every death, every internal memo that proved Tarkon's environmental manipulations. The forced disappearances, the synthetic disasters disguised as accidents. All of it lived in his memory now, each fact a weapon. As he suited up in his forged technician gear, Maya approached him quietly. "If this works," she said, "we hit them where they're weakest, public trust. They'll scramble. They'll deny, but the evidence is there, and if we move fast, we can follow it straight to Site 13. Logan's eyes met hers. "You still think she's there?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Conrad didn't kill her, he's too careful, and Elizabeth was never a loose end. She was a threat, one he wanted to hold in case he ever needed leverage. That's what Site 13 was built for." Logan fastened the final strap of his uniform. "Then once this is done, we're going to that site." He arrived at the Hamilton Gray under a false identity, passing through security checkpoints with credentials generated by Ren's team. The lanyard around his neck identified him as Audio Engineer, Section B. No one looked twice. Inside, the venue buzzed with the polished chaos of a corporate showcase. Sleek banners, name tags, espresso bars in every corner. Guests mingled under high ceilings and custom lighting designed to impress, while armed security patrolled discreetly in the background. Thorne met him in a utility hallway near the rear AV booth. She was younger than he expected, no older than 23, with restless eyes and fingers that twitched like live wires. She didn't speak much, only handed him a tiny transmitter and said, "Press once when ready. Don't screw up." The AV room overlooked the main conference hall through tinted glass. Below, hundreds of attendees filed into rows of theater seats facing a massive stage. At the center, a massive screen displayed Tarkon's corporate motto, "Engineering Tomorrow." Logan's heart pounded. At exactly 9:56, Conrad Lewis walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, professional. He smiled the kind of smile built for cameras. Logan watched as he thanked the crowd, made jokes about progress and innovation. He spoke with confidence, measured cadence, artificial warmth. To anyone else, he looked like a leader. But Logan saw something else, someone who had mastered the art of dismantling lives with paperwork. Thorne's voice came through his earpiece. "Feed override primed, on your mark." Logan looked at the screen, then at the transmitter in his hand. His thumb hovered over the button. "Do it," he whispered. He pressed. The screen behind Conrad flickered, the house lights dimmed, the corporate banner disappeared, and Logan's face appeared. There was no introduction, no title card, just Logan standing in the AV room staring straight into the camera. "My name is Lucas Crosswell. You may know me by another name. You may not know me at all, but for the last 18 years, I was hidden by a system designed to erase people like me." Gasps echoed through the hall. Conrad turned, stiffened. Logan continued, voice steady. "My mother was Dr. Elizabeth Crosswell, a scientist who uncovered a chemical called XR-17 and its potential for catastrophic harm to the environment and human health. When she tried to report it, she disappeared. She wasn't the only one." He raised a hand, holding up a copy of the Tarkon memo. "This is a classified directive from inside Tarkon Dynamics. It outlines a program to suppress whistleblowers through surveillance, coercion, and in some cases, forced disappearance. It also details how the children of those whistleblowers, like me, were relocated into controlled homes to prevent any chance of exposure." The room descended into chaos. Security moved. Conrad shouted something, but the mic didn't pick it up. Logan pressed on. "This isn't conjecture. These are facts. Verified documents, names, dates. You'll find them all in the files being uploaded right now to every major press outlet in the country. And if you're watching this, I ask one thing. Don't let this be buried again." He paused. And to Conrad Lewis, if you're still wondering whether my mother is alive, you already know the answer. The screen went black. Logan turned to Thorne. Get out, now! They bolted from the booth just as security teams burst through the opposite corridor. Thorne ducked through a maintenance hatch. Logan sprinted through a side hallway, heart pounding, lungs on fire. Outside, Maya waited in a stolen car, engine running. He dove into the passenger seat. She hit the gas. As they disappeared into the maze of city streets, sirens began to echo behind them. But Logan didn't look back. He wasn't finished yet, not until she was free. The city was burning, not with fire, but with attention. By the time Logan and Maya had crossed the Potomac River, the video had already gone viral. It began on an independent news stream, then spread like a tidal wave across forums, encrypted chat rooms, and media platforms. Within minutes, the words Lucas Crosswell XR17 and Tarkon Dynamics were trending across every corner of the digital world. Some denied it, others demanded more. But the most dangerous reactions weren't outrage or disbelief. They were silence. Institutional silence. The kind that signaled something deeper was breaking, that the machine had taken a hit it hadn't anticipated. From the passenger seat, Logan stared at the world through the car window, as if it had changed shape. In a way, it had. For 18 years he had existed in a story written by others. Now for the first time he had seized the pen, but there was still one chapter unwritten, one thread left tangled in the shadows. His mother. They drove northeast through the night, the headlights cutting across long stretches of forest and desolate highways. Maya was silent, focused, her face tight with calculation. She had barely spoken since they fled the conference center, her mind clearly racing through the next phase. As dawn approached, she pulled into a secluded rest stop nestled in a curve of the highway. Trees formed a natural wall around them. She killed the engine and looked at Logan. She's at Site 13, Maya said. Logan didn't need to ask how she knew. The video forced their hand, she continued. An intercepted comms burst went out 20 minutes after your face hit that screen. Coded orders to a facility in western Pennsylvania. That site was dark for years. Then it went hot. Personnel orders, security uplinks, it matches the profile. Logan tightened his grip on the dashboard. You think they're going to move her? They have to, Maya replied. The exposure means she's now a liability they can't afford. But moving her is risky. They'll want to do it quietly, with no external support, no digital trail. That gives us one chance. She unfolded a map on the dashboard, traced a path with her finger. Site 13 is buried under a decommissioned mining facility. The entrance is sealed, monitored by 2 external cameras and a biometric gate. There's a secondary access tunnel 300 yards into the forest, hidden behind an artificial rock formation. That's our way in. Logan's mind raced through every scenario. What if it was a trap? What if she wasn't there? What if they were too late? But the doubt didn't last. He had come this far not by chance, but by choosing not to let fear decide the outcome. His mother had risked everything to keep him out of their hands. Now it was his turn to risk everything, to bring her back. They left the rest stop at first light, driving with purpose into the Pennsylvania hills. The terrain changed subtly as they climbed. Denser woods, jagged rock formations, signs of an industrial past left to rust. The GPS coordinates Maya had intercepted led them to a fenced perimeter lined with faded warning signs. Beyond the gate, a series of dilapidated buildings slouched against the earth, swallowed by vines and rot. But beneath them, they both knew something alive was watching. They parked the vehicle a half-mile from the site and moved on foot, cutting through the forest with deliberate silence. Maya guided them to the artificial rock formation, a structure that looked ordinary to anyone not trained to notice the seams. She pried it open with a magnetic key retrieved from a dead Tarkon contact years earlier, and a narrow steel corridor revealed itself behind the false stone. They entered, weapons drawn, every step echoing against the metal walls. The tunnel descended into darkness, and then, after what felt like hours, opened into a maintenance corridor lined with inactive lighting panels. From there, they found a stairwell that descended another 2 stories before ending in a steel door with no handle. Maya knelt and exposed a keypad hidden beneath a panel of rusted steel. She entered a sequence slowly, eyes never leaving the space behind them. The door clicked and the wall shifted inward. They stepped into a world no one was meant to see. Site 13 was not just a holding facility. It was a lab, a prison, and a vault. The walls were lined with observation windows, most of them dark. One room held decaying equipment, another bore the remnants of chemical testing. But what caught Logan's attention was the series of numbered cells, each marked with a 3-digit code. Most were empty. One was not. Maya scanned the system, through a central terminal, and pulled up the active cell log. Room 203, she said. That's the only one with a living occupant. Logan moved before she finished the sentence. They sprinted down the corridor, passing rooms filled with shadows and silence. When they reached room 203, Logan stopped. A small window allowed a glimpse inside. She sat in a chair, bolted to the floor, wrists free, eyes closed. Her hair was longer, streaked with grey, her face thinner, her body wrapped in a simple white uniform. But it was her, Elizabeth Crosswell, alive. Logan couldn't breathe. He pressed his hand to the glass. She opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a long, uneasy dream, and she smiled. Maya bypassed the lock, and the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Elizabeth stood, slowly, unsteady on her feet, but her eyes never left her son's. "Lucas," she said, voice hoarse but clear. He stepped forward, unable to hold back. She opened her arms. He collapsed into them. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't cinematic. It was real. Years of silence, pain, fear, and longing released in a single, trembling embrace. Logan held onto her like the world was breaking around them, because for a moment it had. Maya gave them space, but her voice cut through the reunion with urgency. "We have to go. Now." Elizabeth nodded, her strength returning with each breath. "They'll come." "They're already looking," Maya said, "but we're not staying." They moved through the corridors with haste, retracing their path to the surface. As they emerged into the forest, the first sounds of rotor blades echoed through the sky. A surveillance drone, late but relentless, swept the area. Maya cursed. "Extraction point, 2 miles southeast, we run." They didn't stop, not for the pain in their lungs, not for the warnings overhead, not for the years they had lost. They ran because they had no other choice, and because now, finally, they were together. The extraction point was a clearing just beyond the forest's edge, where the trees gave way to a shallow ravine and a stretch of abandoned railway. It had been marked years ago in one of Maya's early contingency plans, long before Logan knew her name. It wasn't just a safe exit. It was a symbol of foresight, of preparing for the impossible. And now, as the sun broke through the morning mist, it was the last stretch between survival and whatever came next. They ran in silence, feet pounding against the damp forest floor, the rhythm of pursuit echoing faintly behind them. Elizabeth moved slower than Logan or Maya, but not weakly. There was a defiance in the way she kept pace, a core of strength that hadn't been broken in captivity. She didn't speak as they ran, didn't ask questions, didn't stumble. Her eyes stayed focused on the trail ahead, and though her breaths were shallow, her steps never hesitated. When they reached the clearing, the extraction vehicle, a heavily modified SUV disguised as a surveyor's truck, was already waiting. Jude stood beside it, scanning the tree line with a high-powered optic. He gave a brief nod as they approached, then opened the back door without a word. Elizabeth climbed in first, followed by Maya. Logan hesitated for a second, his eyes scanning the horizon. No movement, no sound but the wind. Then he got in and the vehicle peeled away from the site, tires digging into the gravel and dirt. For the first time since the broadcast, Logan allowed himself to breathe. The ride was long, silent at first. Maya drove, her eyes locked on the road ahead, while Jude monitored communications. The vehicle's onboard systems were dark, no digital trail, no GPS, only pre-programmed routes buried in analog systems. They would not be tracked, not this time. In the back seat, Logan sat beside his mother, the weight of the moment pressing on both of them. He wanted to speak, to ask her everything, but the words came slow, tangled in years of absence. "You're real," he finally whispered. Elizabeth turned her head, her eyes full of something he hadn't expected, guilt. "I didn't know if I ever would see you again," she said. "Not like this. Not after everything." Logan shook his head. "You don't have to explain. They tried to make me forget, tried to make me someone else, but I found you. That's what matters now." She reached for his hand. It was cold, her fingers thin, but there was a steadiness in her grip. "You found me," she repeated. Almost in disbelief, Maya glanced at them through the rearview mirror but said nothing. Jude kept his eyes on the scanner, his silence protective. Elizabeth looked out the window, the trees passing in a blur. "How much do you know?" "Everything," Logan said. "XR-17, the adoption protocol, the way they built the system to erase people like you, like me. We have the files. We exposed it." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Good. It has to end. Every part of it." There was a pause before she added, "They came for me the day I was supposed to testify. I had the evidence ready. Scientific, legal, personal. I had names, places, and I had you, hidden. Safe, I thought. But someone inside the agency gave me up. They took me before I ever reached the capital." "You fought them," Logan said, "even from inside." "I never stopped writing," she said. "I kept records in my head, in the walls, in messages buried where they wouldn't think to look. Maya helped me before they took her off the grid. I knew if anyone could survive long enough, it would be her. And you knew I would come." "I hoped," she corrected. "But I couldn't be sure. They rewrote everything. Your name, your life. When I saw your face in that broadcast, I knew it hadn't been for nothing." Tears welled in Logan's eyes, but he didn't let them fall. Not yet. "We're not done. We're going to finish this." Maya spoke for the first time in miles. "The world's already reacting. There are investigations opening, senators asking questions, whistleblower protections being reviewed. But it won't hold unless we move fast." Elizabeth nodded. "We need to show them what comes next. Not just the crime, but the consequence. Tarkon has to fall, not tomorrow, not slowly, now." The vehicle pulled into a safe house hidden behind a disused service station on the state border. Inside, the network had already set up a temporary command post. Wren was there, along with Devon and a few others Logan didn't recognize. New faces drawn by the signal he had sent into the world. The moment Elizabeth stepped inside, a wave of silence fell over the room. People stared, some in disbelief, others in awe. She didn't shrink from the attention. She met their gazes with calm authority. "She's alive," Devon said quietly. "That changes everything." "We act today," Wren said. "We drop the second wave of files, the ones with location data, contracts, financial records. We tie it all together, and we put her voice on the record." Elizabeth looked at Logan. "Let's finish it." They set up a recording station in the secure room at the center of the safe house. Logan watched as his mother sat before the camera, her hands folded, her eyes unwavering. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Crosswell," she said, "and for the last 17 years, I've been held in a clandestine facility operated by a private contractor known as Tarkon Dynamics, with the full knowledge of certain government operatives." She spoke of XR-17, of falsified reports, of the suppression of truth. She detailed Project Guardian, the manipulation of adoption systems, the network of handlers paid to erase dissident children. She gave names, dates, signatures, and then she said, "They took everything from me, but they did not take my voice, and now I give it back to the world." The video went live 2 hours later. By nightfall, a congressional committee had called for emergency hearings. By morning, Tarkon stock had crashed nearly 30%. By midday, a federal injunction froze all active operations pending a full investigation. Logan watched it all unfold with his mother beside him. And as the news anchors struggled to frame the scope of what had been revealed, Elizabeth turned to him and said, "You don't yet know what you're capable of." He believed her, not because of what they had done, but because of what they still had left to do. The world that Logan woke up to 3 days later was not the same one he had known before. The illusion had cracked. The machinery that had once operated behind polished glass and bureaucratic smiles was now exposed, its gears dripping with the oil of secrecy, deception, and human cost. Tarkon Dynamics, once untouchable, was now in retreat, offices shuttered, executives silent, lobbyists scrambling to rewrite their affiliations. The damage had been done, not just to the company, but to the system that had protected it for so long. But none of that brought Logan peace. He stood on the rooftop of the Safehouse complex, the cold wind of early spring rushing past him. Below, the world was shifting. Inside, analysts compiled evidence for public trials. Legal experts worked to ensure every file dropped was both authentic and admissible, and members of the network met with newly minted whistleblowers who had begun to step forward after seeing Logan's broadcast. The truth had sparked something, not just outrage, but momentum. Elizabeth had become more than a symbol. She was now a witness, a voice that could not be ignored. Her testimony had been requested by 3 major congressional panels, and she had accepted. But not out of vengeance. She had made it clear. This was about rebuilding what had been broken, not burning it to the ground. Logan watched her from a distance sometimes, caught in small moments. The way she sipped her tea with both hands, the way her fingers tapped lightly against her leg when she was thinking, the way she paused before answering questions, weighing not just her words but the consequences. She had been shaped by captivity but not broken by it. There was a clarity in her now, and Logan had begun to understand that the strength he had found in himself, the ability to keep going even when everything told him to stop, had come from her, whether he had known it or not. Maya had started, rebuilding the network. The exposure had forced them into the light, but instead of scattering, they were reorganizing. No longer just a resistance, they were becoming an institution of accountability, a coalition of voices from every corner of the country, bound not by ideology but by a shared refusal to let silence win. Maya asked Logan if he wanted to stay involved, to take a leadership role. He had hesitated. "I need to figure out who I am," he told her, "outside of the fight." She had nodded, understanding. "But when you're ready, there's work to do." He was beginning to see that too. In the weeks that followed, arrests began. Conrad Lewis had vanished shortly after the broadcast, but his name was now permanently attached to a growing list of violations. Several high-level Tarkon officials were indicted. The congressional hearings became televised events, drawing millions. The term Project Guardian became a national shame, and with it, a rallying cry for reform. Mark and Susan had disappeared. Their house in Wilmington was found abandoned, stripped of anything personal. Logan didn't go looking for them. He no longer needed anything from them, not answers, not apologies. They were part of a world he had stepped out of, and looking back felt like wasting time that now had too much value. He and Elizabeth began to rebuild something between them. Not the past, it was too fragmented, too scarred, but a present built on choice. They shared meals, walked in the gardens near the safe house, talked late into the night. She told him stories about his first year, about the way he used to laugh when the wind moved through the trees. He told her about the years in silence, the small rebellions he didn't understand until now, the day he found the box in the basement. Sometimes the weight of it all would catch up to them. A scent, a word, a silence too long. But they never let it win. They had already survived the worst. Now survival wasn't enough. It was time to live. Logan began writing again, not reports, not exposés, stories, fragments of memory, pieces of his journey, fictional reflections of truths too strange to explain otherwise. The page gave him space to breathe. He didn't publish anything, not yet, but the words were no longer a shield. They were a bridge. One afternoon, Elizabeth found him sitting alone under the canopy behind the safe house, a stack of handwritten pages beside him. "Do you ever wonder why they feared the truth so much?" he asked. She sat beside him. "Because truth doesn't need weapons. It doesn't need walls or armies, it just needs to be heard." He looked at her, the woman who had risked everything, not just for a cause, but for a future she might never see. "I want to help build something," he said. "Not just tear things down, I want to make sure no one else goes through what we did." She smiled. "Then it starts with you deciding what that world should look like." So he did. He joined. Myers restructured team not as a field operative, but as a public liaison. He gave interviews, stood beside victims coming forward, helped translate jargon into stories people could understand. He didn't want fame. He wanted clarity. He wanted to turn the legacy of XR-17 of Project Guardian into more than a cautionary tale. He wanted it to be a reckoning that meant change. As spring turned to summer and the hearings expanded into formal legislation, Logan stood in the gallery with Elizabeth as the first piece of reform passed, a bill that would place independent oversight on all private government contractors and establish strict protections for whistleblowers, including children affected by covert operations. It wasn't everything, but it was the first brick. That night, Elizabeth and Logan sat beneath the stars, no longer hunted, no longer hidden. "You know," she said softly, "I spent years believing I'd lost you forever. But the truth is I never stopped feeling you out there. I used to think I was broken," he said, "but I was just waiting to find out who I really was. You're still finding out, and I'm not afraid of that anymore." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the night sky. And when Logan finally stood, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Weightless, free. Because his smile on his 18th birthday hadn't been about arrogance or secret power. It had been something deeper. It had been the quiet certainty of a boy who had glimpsed the truth before anyone else dared to look. And now the world had finally looked back,